Hey YouTubers, the last time I left you in suspense, I was trying to fight off the snap ring that held on the fifth gear cluster on this transmission. I failed at that endeavor. Both sets of Harbor Freight ring pliers, the cheap red-handled $6 Harbor Freight pliers, they don't open far enough to remove an external snap ring of this size. Okay, you can put those pliers on there and bring the handles all the way together with the strongest hand in the world. It will not open that snap ring far enough to get it off the shaft. So took them back, exchanged them, went to the $13 Harbor Freight again Quinn brand pliers. They're absolute junk. They have something wrong in the mechanism where they pivot to where once you put them on a snap ring and it sees resistance, but it has a whole bunch of lost movement. In other words, when you have your two ends on your snap ring pliers that have to go into your receiver holes and open that snap ring, you can put them in there, but I'd just call it the tension of this beefy snap ring, you can only open the snap ring about the same distance as you can with the cheap $6 pliers, which results in the same problem. It wasn't coming off. So Will came by with his Matco or one of those name brand snap ring plier sets and immediately, promptly removed the snap ring, started disassembling the transmission. Tried to get a little bit of video of it. It was at night with the garage door shut, as many lights on as I could possibly turn on. I couldn't get a video that was worth even showing you guys. I apologize for that. But once you get to the point where you're able to take that off, your snap ring, then you can slide your fifth gear shift fork is going to come off the shaft. You know what I mean? You've got a shaft sticking out there. So it's all going to come off in one assembly where you got your shift fork, your fifth gear cluster, I guess you'd call it. So here's the bad news. The noise that we heard in this vehicle, both Will and I would have bet the bank that noise was coming from inside this transmission, because literally you could feel it and hear it inside the transmission. So we pull this thing apart, get everything pulled out of the case. We can't find anything wrong with it. There's no broken gears, there's no burned up or damaged bearings. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these, but this large bearing right here, that's the bearing for this, what I call the back side of the case. It's not damaged. There's nothing wrong with it. You know what I mean? There's not even excessive play in the cage around it. There's absolutely no heat issues or wear of any kind that we can see on this bearing or the race. You know, I don't see any major damage on this race. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and change all the bearings in the transmission because I'm just dumbfounded what could make as much noise as this thing was making and not be a bearing, because there's absolutely no broken teeth, no excessive anything. This is the input shaft. See if you guys can see this. It's got a little bit of, I don't know, I guess we would call it phonographing if you were looking at crankshaft journal. Got a little bit of phonographing on the race, a little bit of excessive play on this cage, but surely that little bit of an issue, unless this thing was extremely under shimmed, because you have to shim it to get to zero play. You want zero play in your shafts in your T-5. Perhaps it wasn't shimmed enough to keep this bearing tight And maybe that's what was making that roaring noise. I have no idea. But there's no heat issues. There's no obvious, just, smoked bearing. I don't see any issues whatsoever with the teeth, anywhere on this thing. Inside of there where your roller bearing, you got 15 roller bearings that set in there. I don't see any damage there. Of course, I'm going to go ahead and replace all the bearings, because you've got one on your input shaft, then you got that main large bearing that goes here. Go ahead and get that done. We also looked at the synchronizers, because I have had problems with this thing not shifting what I consider smoothly. We've also had issues with it getting hung up in between gears a couple of times, probably at least 3 times since I had this vehicle running with this T-5. Even though it visually looks like the synchronizers are still good, I'm going to opt, while it's out, to redo all the bearings, all the synchronizers, and make sure it's 100% correct. During the upgrade process, I'm going to replace the shift fork pads, because these are showing some wear. I don't know if you guys will be able to see it on the camera, but this little plastic nylon, it's probably nylon, you can see where it's worn down into like a groove. That's not a good sign. But they make upgraded versions where these little shift fork pads are bronze instead of plastic or nylon. $50. Who would have thought 6 little bronze pads that just snap onto these shift forks would cost $50? But it's what they recommend for, building a stronger version of this transmission. So I'm going with the bronze shift fork pads. I'm going to get, this is a stamped steel counter shaft support. I'm replacing this, because this is a known upgrade for the T5, so it'll handle more power. I'm replacing this stamped steel counter shaft support plate with one that's, I don't know, it looks like at least 1/4 inch thick steel plate, solid steel plate, to give it more support without allowing it to flex as much. So here's an issue we did find, and maybe this, if you guys are T5 experts, please feel free to chime in. It's got what I would consider excessive in play on the counter shaft. Listen to this. You know what I mean? This thing is supposed to spin almost quiet, no noise, and you should have 0 in play. That's bad. But as far as the disassembly and inspecting this T5 to find out what was making that horrendous noise, only thing we've really found is the in play on that counter shaft is too much. It's not within spec. So I don't know. You guys help me figure. On with the bronze shift fork pads, the solid steel heavy duty counter shaft support. Okay guys, finally got my brain on straight. Apparently I dropped it on the floor and had to pick it up. The things I'm upgrading to this T5 are what people call the shift keys. I'm going from the factory style shift key to the billet shift keys, and I think it has slightly stronger springs, or like little retaining clip. Steel retaining plate for the counter shaft support ordered. The only thing I have to order now are those stupid bronze shift fork pads, because I wasn't actually expecting those to cost $50. So in my mind I thought, oh, those are just little pads that go on these shift forks, they're not going to be that expensive. You'd be wrong. One thing that I did notice, which I was kind of happy about, and I don't know how common this is, But this Trans Am, I have been corrected because we looked up a bunch of the numbers on this transmission case. It's actually a 1991 Pontiac Trans Am T-5. I've been calling it a Camaro. It's actually just all under the banner of an F-body T-5. But this front input shaft support is steel. Like, apparently there's some versions that are aluminum, but in the V8 performance builds, you want your front support to be steel, which I got lucky. I just wanted you guys to just have kind of a close-up of this main shaft cluster. You know what I mean? There's no issues anywhere in any of the gear sets. Everything turns free. I have no idea what could have been making that noise or that issue I was having. I can show you the counter shaft. There's no gear damage, no broken teeth, nothing. You know, this thing spins free. See if you guys can hear that on the video. There's no crunchy, munchy, none of that junk going on with the bearings. I'm going to go ahead and try to replace as much as I can on the rebuild, because it's so much fun to pull this out and put it back in. You know, why wouldn't you fix everything that you possibly could while you had it apart? So, but like I said, it's got too much in play so that you can even see it. Watch. That's too much. And that can cause failure on wide open throttle shifting, because when you have too much in play in your counter shaft, it can cause flexing problems, which will cause gear meshing problems, therefore damage or catastrophic failure. Anyway, I apologize for not being able to show more of the actual disassembly as Will and I pulled it apart. But it's literally step by step, just like the disassembly and rebuild videos on YouTube. So that's where we're at. Ordering parts to rebuild it and make it stronger, and make it stronger than it was before. Set up the clearances to handle as much power as it can. So, since we haven't found any red herrings, we haven't found any direct correlations to the noise that we heard, the only thing that we can deduct is that something inside that rear end is still not right. Here's the parts I did not change. Outer axle bearings were not replaced. The front U-joint was not replaced. And the pilot bearing / bushing in the back of the crankshaft was not replaced. Now, does anybody out there in the YouTube land, can an axle bearing make so much noise that it echoes up through the drive shaft? We've never seen it before, but all the other components of the center section have been replaced with new bearings, an entire different carrier. I mean, everything was replaced, you know, torqued, set up. I don't understand, unless there's just an inherent piece that's damaged that I didn't see. That's where I'm at, waiting on parts to come in. Probably this Friday I'll go ahead and order the shift fork pads, because I didn't know they were going to be 50 bucks. I'll get them on their way, and next step at the beginning of December, I will probably try to find a deal on a complete rebuild kit so that I can get the parts I need to rebuild this thing and make sure it's 100%. So that's where I'm at, guys. Sorry I didn't get you video of the actual disassembly, but it was a huge pain in the rear. There's a good YouTube word. And that's where I'm at. So still looking forward to trying to put this thing back together stronger, put it back in the vehicle, because I enjoy having the clutch pedal and this .63 overdrive too much to go without it. So I appreciate you guys watching these videos. Please like, subscribe, share. You know, suggestions for videos, let me know. I'm on board to help anybody out if I can. Thank you.